afternoon, everyone. This is the Committee on Legislative Oversight. Today is Tuesday, July 21st, 2020. I understand that the state law requires that I read the following announcement at the beginning of every remote hearing for public hearings for City Council. Due to the current health public crisis, the City of Philadelphia's council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. The instructions for how the public may offer input or view the committees are included in the public notifications in the Inquirer, Daily News, the Legal Intelligencer, or can be found on PhiladelphiaCouncil.com. I note that the time has come. Ms. Williams, will you please read the title of the resolution?
Sure.
No, wait a minute. Before we do that, can you please take roll of who is on the committee and who is present? And for those who are present, will you say a few words so that the camera can put your image on television?
Councilmember Squilla.
Present. Happy to join the hearing today. Thank you.
Councilmember Thomas.
Good afternoon. I'm present. Happy to be here.
Councilmember Green.
Good afternoon. Present. Looking forward to an engaging conversation.
And Councilmember Gim.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you. This is the most important issue we can be talking about.
And Councilman Jones, all members of the Legislative Oversight Committee are present.
Thank you. A quorum of this committee is present, and this hearing is now called to order. Ms. Williams, would you please also recognize council members who are not on the committee but are in attendance today?
Joining us today, we have Councilmember Parker. We have Councilmember Gilmore Richardson.
I'm present. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Brooks. Councilmember Sanchez.
Good afternoon. Looking forward to the discussion.
And we also have Councilmember Gautier.
Present and look forward to participating in this important discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. And I also understand that we have some very special guests from the House of Representatives joining this hearing today. Can you make their presence known?
Yes, present with us today, we also have our state invitees, State Representative Kevin Boyle.
Hello, everyone. Good to be here.
We also have with us State Representative Joseph Ceresi, State Representative Pam D'Alessio, State Representative Isabella Fitzgerald, State Representative Joseph Hohenstein, State Representative Brian Sims, and State Representative Wendy Ullman.
Thank you again, Ms. Williams. With that, we are ready to begin the public hearing of the Committee on Legislative Oversight regarding resolution number 200376. Ms. Williams, will you please read the title of the resolution?
Resolution number 200376, authorizing the Philadelphia City Council Committee on Legislative Oversight to hold public hearings examining issues that arose from the primary election mail-in ballot process and recommendations for necessary procedures to improve voter education and voter processes for the upcoming general election, including potential funding and staffing needs of the Philadelphia City Commissioner's Office.
Thank you again, Ms. Williams. Before we begin this hearing and the testimony, we want to let people know today that we are being recorded. And by you continuing to be on this call, there is no reasonable expectation of privacy, and that you will be recorded, and we make it clear that this will be a part of the record. With that,
And Councilman, I also failed to recognize that State Representative Joseph Webster is also with us on the call.
duly noted. We also want you to realize that to be recognized, to ask questions, we will be using the chat feature. This chat feature can only be used in that regard as to allow transparency. And so therefore, anyone who is interested in being recognized to question a witness will use that chat feature, and Ms. Williams will recognize you. Okay, and with that, I promised I would cut down my opening remarks, which were written. So every election since I've been able to vote, and I've only missed one election in my lifetime, people will tell you that this is the most important election before you. They said that all the way back to the charter change with Rizzo. They said it again and again with every state and city municipal election. But I absolutely believe that just maybe this time it may be true. I remember the feeling with the presidential election for Barack Obama, but I do think we are at a crossroads in this country and in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And what is most important on a nonpartisan basis, no matter who wins or loses, that the citizenry of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and in particular the city of Philadelphia, believe and are assured that it is a fair and open process. There are people already developing narratives about how this election process, whether it's by voting by mail or just by being in an urban blue state, that somehow people will be disenfranchised. The purpose of this resolution, and I'm so very thankful to Representative Kevin Boyle for bringing this up, is to be transparent, to do our best to make sure that this process is one that everyone can look at and say, no matter where the chips fell, it was fair, that it was transparent, and that there were no improprieties. So with that, if I could, Ms. Williams, I'd like to recognize Representative Kevin Boyle.
Thank you, Councilman Jones, and thank you to all my colleagues and friends on City Council. I used to be a staffer for Councilman Bill Greenlee, so it is very nice to be partaking again in the activities of City Council and seeing some familiar faces as well. Before I start off, I do want to say something about a great guy that I used to work with when I was a City Council staffer, and that is Mr. Curtis Cephas, who is the father of Morgan Cephas, who actually just passed away in the last few days. And what an amazing man he was, and Philadelphia, the West Philadelphia community, and everyone really, we're at a loss due to his passing. And he reared some amazing children, and he was a remarkable man. And I'm sorry for your loss, Councilman Jones.
I had the honor of working with him, yes.
Yeah. So I am the Democratic chair of the State Government Committee, and we on the House State Government Committee, we are the first committee that usually sees any election-related bills. We're also the first committee to see all the negative GOP and the shutdown and COVID-19 related bills also, but that's a whole nother story. Today, I thought it was a useful usage of time for us to come together, not just as state representatives and members of City Council, but leaders not just in the city of Philadelphia, but also suburban Philadelphia, because some of the members of the House Democratic State Committee are from suburban Philadelphia. So with that in mind, I reached out to Majority Leader Sherrell Parker and also Councilman Jones, and together we came up with this idea of a joint hearing, because as Councilman Jones pointed out, all eyes are going to be on the state of Pennsylvania, specifically on the city of Philadelphia. With this election coming in November, it is truly the most important election in our lifetime, and I think probably the most important election probably since 1860. So we need to be on. Philadelphia needs to be up with what is going on with our voting systems. And we in the Pennsylvania State Legislature, we need to be able to advocate for the best voting system that can possibly be put in place for the election in the city of Philadelphia and also throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We do not want after the election, after the Tuesday general election in November, we don't want to be Florida in 2000. We don't want to be the Iowa caucus this past winter. We don't want to see any sort of delay in terms of declaring a winner, because ultimately this state could put one candidate over the top. And we don't want the focus of the country and the world to be on us. And it would certainly be in a negative light. And we need to use these summer months to put together a system that will address some of the flaws that we saw in the June primary. If the June primary were to be replicated with this general election, it would be a national and probably an international story. And that is certainly not to criticize the city commissioners in any way whatsoever. They were thrown a situation that was truly unprecedented, not just due to COVID-19 or the protests related to George Floyd's murder, but also the changes to Act 77, which greatly expanded mail-in voting. That expansion of mail-in voting in Act 77 actually went through our committee in Harrisburg. So the members of this committee that are on this call right now, we're intimately aware of that even before I think most of the public were. Right now, an update to my colleagues in City Council and people watching at home. Democrats in the State House, along with our colleagues in the State Senate, and also, perhaps most importantly, with our Governor Wolf, that we are in negotiations with reforms to the voting system with the Republican majorities in the House and Senate. We have some ideas right now on ways we can improve the voting system, but I want to hear from members of City Council on this so I can be a better advocate in Harrisburg. And maybe most importantly, I want to hear from our very able chairwoman of the City Commissioners, Lisa Deely, and also Omar Sabir, and also Al Schmidt. I think that we could learn a lot from this discussion. And thank you to Councilman Jones for working with me and my staff to put this together. And I think going forth in the future, I think it's very good for us Democratic members of the State House to work with our colleagues in City Council so we can be a better voice for all of Philadelphia. Thank you, Chairman Jones.
Thank you so much, Representative. I noted that our president, President Darrell Clark, has joined us. Are you there, President Clark?
How are you, Councilman?
How are you?
I miss you guys.
Would you like to say a few words of welcome, Mr. President?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey guys, I just wanted to sit in for a few and just kind of get a sense of what's going on. Know a lot of challenges and potentially even more challenges as we move ahead. Want to thank our state partners for staying on top of this whole issue with respect to our ability to vote. And Mr. Chair and the members of the committee, thank you all for getting on this early and not waiting until the problem exists and being ahead of curve, so to speak, so we can be sure that everybody has a real opportunity, because we all know every day how important the November election is. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Sure.
Ms. Williams, are any members of the committee in the chat room wish to be recognized?
No one requested to be recognized at this time.
Okay, going once, going twice. All right, can we now bring the first panel to testify?
I did have State Representative Boyle as our first panelist, but if he has no other comments, we can call up our city commissioners. We have with us today Commissioner Lisa Deely and Commissioner Omar Sabir and Commissioner Al Smith.
Welcome. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much.
State your name for the record, and you've been here before. Begin your testimony. How are you, commissioners?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Commissioner Deely, Chairwoman of the Philadelphia City Commissioners. We, the City Commissioners, are charged with conducting the elections in Philadelphia. This is a difficult enough task in the best of times, as money, the election code, state guidance, procurement, and the ability to purchase or rent space are all outside of our control. I think I speak for all of my staff and the elections personnel around the Commonwealth when I say that it is a less than thankless job. We are frequently faced with decisions where there is no good option, and the best option is often just the least bad one. Often enough, we are left to carry the water for decisions that are made in Washington, Harrisburg, or on the second or fourth floors, oftentimes at the last minute. The June primary election was unlike any election we had before in Philadelphia and will ever have again. Everything but the kitchen sink was thrown at us for June. And although it had its bumps, we are proud to not have had the issues we saw throughout other parts of the country where things did not go as well. As we look back to June, we know that poll workers were and continue to be the true heroes of the day. In following public health procedures to the best of our ability, COVID-19 caused the cancellation of our election board training classes, an unprecedented move that was done in consultation with the state and out of the safety of our election board workers, our training host sites, and our staff. If you consider that we changed the entire way we stand up an in-person election, moved poll workers out of their usual locations, had them work on boards where they were unfamiliar with each other on a still new voting system with no training, it is a true testament to our neighbors who are so committed to the voting process that Election Day proceeded in these historic conditions. For the primary, a huge effort to highlight the mail-in ballot option was undertaken. The Department of State mailed every Democrat and Republican voter a postcard with the URL to the online application and conducted a TV and social media campaign. In Philadelphia, we provided information and paper applications with the city's food distribution program, and we partnered with City Council on radio advertising. We thank you all for that collaboration. The aforementioned robust communication efforts have already begun for November. All the department's social media accounts are urging Philadelphians to vote, to apply for mail-in ballot daily. We will continue to look at the email and texting option in order to drive voters to the online form, and we will again look to partner with the food distribution program, as we did in the primary. I plan to put forth a motion that the Board of Elections prepay the return postage of the ballots so that voters do not have to leave their homes to buy a stamp. As of today, with permanent and new applications, Philadelphia already has over 140,000 mail-in ballot applications, and that number will likely more than double before the October deadline. For comparison purposes, the board received 225,230 applications for the June primary, 16,101 applications for the 2012 general election, 15,887 applications for the 2016 general, and 5,742 for the 2016 primary. For the general election, I ask that the state please continue the efforts that were made in the primary, and in addition, make the information about applying for a mail-in ballot available. Sorry.
Are you there? Are you okay?
I am. My screen went blank. I apologize.
All right.
I asked the state to please continue the efforts that were made in the primary, and in addition, make the information about applying for mail-in ballots available with the online portal Pennsylvanians use to apply for unemployment claims, as well as other sites that access other state resources and paper applications, and information be put in bags at wine and spirit stores. I ask that the city place the link to apps.philadelphiavotes.com on all their websites, which will direct voters to all the various ways they can apply for a ballot. Counting all the mail-in ballots during a global pandemic proved to be a monumental task, where at times we were unsure if we would certify the election on time. New York City, who, like us, saw a spike in the number of mail ballots this primary, is still counting their mail ballots 3 weeks after their primary election. I am proud to say that despite what is stated in the resolution authorizing this hearing, we did certify on time, something that not every county in the Commonwealth did, and this could not have happened without a tremendous undertaking by our dedicated staff. We are looking into ways that can speed up the process for November without sacrificing accuracy. Philadelphia voters also sent us a message on June 2nd. Despite a pandemic, polling place changes, civil unrest, curfews, and the availability of the new no-excuse mail-in ballot option, they left their homes to go vote. As we prepare now for November, we cannot lose sight of the fact that a significant percentage of Philadelphia voters will prefer to vote in person on the machines rather than through the mail. Whatever reason that may be, we must prepare to stand up to elections to meet the needs of our voters. To give you the sense of the scale of that task, one election will look like our gubernatorial general election, and the other will resemble Denver's presidential election. As we prepare for November, there are new changes making their way through the legislature, which means the counties will likely not get new guidance from the Department of State, who are also swamped and underfunded, until mid-August, or just about when poll worker trainings will be starting up. Assuming that the legislature does not make any additional changes to the declaration envelope, we will be able to order our new supply in time to begin mailing the ballots timely. It is unlikely that the legislature will allow for polling place consolidation in November, but even if they do, it could never be on the level that we saw in the primary. The presidential general election is a totally different animal than any other election in the cycle, and we need to have as many locations available as possible. Therefore, we are working to prepare for a normal division-based election. Since changes are going through the legislature, I do have a few legislative requests. Please eliminate the secrecy envelope requirement for the mail ballots. Pennsylvania is currently only one of just 16 states that require either a secrecy envelope or sleeve to be included with the mail ballots. It is a vestige of the past, back when these ballots were counted at the polling place. Mail ballots are now counted on an industrial level, and the secrecy envelope can be replaced with using outer declaration envelopes with a security lining. A significant amount of time and effort goes into physically removing the ballots from multiple envelopes. First, the secrecy envelopes must be removed from the outer declaration envelope. Then all of the secrecy envelopes must repass through the system so that physical voted ballots can be removed from the secrecy envelopes. This second pass leads to an unnecessary delay in getting the ballots to the scanners. If the secrecy envelope requirement were to be eliminated, then county election officials would be able to more quickly process the ballots after the election. In addition to the extra time that it takes to count the votes after the election, we have also found that the secrecy envelopes create extra confusion for voters, especially for the hundreds of thousands who have never voted through the mail before. As the first elected official to call on the governor and legislature to extend the deadline to return voted ballots to the Board of Elections in the primary, I again urge the same for the November's election and to make it permanent. Due to Governor Wolf's executive order, 9,143 Philadelphia voters had their votes counted in June that otherwise would have been rejected as late. Currently, voted ballots must be received by the Board of Elections by 8 p.m. on Election Day, November 3rd. I ask that the deadline for county boards of elections to receive voted ballots be extended to November 10th, and that all voted ballots received by that date and postmarked by November 3rd be accepted. I also ask that ballots received on November 4th with a missing or damaged postmark also be accepted. This change needs to be announced early. The voters of Philadelphia deserve clarity when dealing with their right to vote, and we have a responsibility to provide clarity and common sense deadlines for voters to cast their ballot. This November will be especially difficult with COVID-19 returning to the region sooner than expected, unfunded mandates, a high-stakes election, a shortage of resources, and a mountain of expectations. I frequently find myself discussing our funding issues only to be told that there is no money, but that is immediately followed with an ask for us to do more. It is frequently to send applications to every voter with return postage, which would cost over $1 million, to add more satellite offices for in-person mail-in locations, which would cost about $140,000 per location, in addition to staff and equipment, to add more ballot drop boxes, which including installation costs up to $10,000 each, plus the additional staff to collect all the ballots, or for advertising outreach to low turnout communities and those that lack internet access, which could cost tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands, depending on the length of the campaign and the medium. These are all things that we are exploring, but they come with a cost. At the same time, we have been flat funded. This means that we currently do not have the money in our budget for the $95,000 per election that we must spend on paper ballots, or the $50,000 to rent the vehicles to collect the paper ballots on election night. We only have $150,000 budgeted for postage in fiscal year 21, far less than the $600,000 that we need to add to our postage accounts for the November election. That does not include the $200,000 in postage to mail every voter's household a postcard listing their polling place, which is not budgeted. The Department of Public Property still does not have the funds in their budget to move us into a long-term warehouse where the machines can be laid out optimally, so that our staff can quickly inspect, repair, pack, and ship the machines. In addition, our COVID-related expenses from the primary will exceed the CARES Act funding that we received. The House fiscal note for Act 77 said, quote, "It is presumed that county boards of elections could handle any influx of voter registrations within a shorter time frame, 30 days down to 15 days, utilizing existing staff and resources," end quote. Clearly, the staffer in the House Appropriations Committee who prepared that document never spoke to a single election official around the Commonwealth. We estimate that the cost of additional staff just on the registration piece alone will be nearly $2 million a year, or we risk not being able to process typical presidential level application volume. After the influx of mail-in ballots from COVID, we now have to look at the possibly trying to hire even more people to process all of those applications. Though this is difficult with our space limitations and the need for social distancing. Before COVID-19, the administration stepped up and increased our budget, but this was later rescinded. As I said in my budget testimony, we would like to ask Council that you please consider revisiting our budget in the first or second quarter of the fiscal year when more information about the city's fiscal health is known. As I said earlier, we are preparing to stand up to elections. In November, an in-person election and a mail-in election. We are expecting about a 50-50 split in voters between the two methods of voting. This means we need to be prepared to process over 350,000 mail ballots, twice as many as we saw in the primary election. To do this in a timely manner, we have been in contact with other large voting jurisdictions around the country who process hundreds of thousands of mail ballots for best practices. Based on those conversations, we are exploring purchasing various election specialized equipment that will speed up the ballot sending and counting process. Basically, we need to start thinking like the Revenue Department rather than the Elections Department in terms of how much mail is moving through our office. For in-person voting, while we know that we will have to get out of some high-risk polling places, we are working to return voters to as many of their normal polling places as possible. Our polling place unit is currently reaching out and contacting the owners of polling places, preparing a list of polling places who are committed to hosting us in November, and finding replacements for those who are not. While the process is still ongoing, we are over halfway confirmed for the number of locations that were used in the 2019 general. I am pleased with this progress, given it is in the middle of summer, and many of these locations have been closed for months. The other key aspect of standing up a normal election in November is the poll workers. Unlike other jurisdictions around the country, Pennsylvania County Boards of Elections have much less control over the poll workers, who they are and where they are working. We do not possess that kind of control, as many of the poll workers are constitutionally elected or court appointed. Much of what we do is to fill vacancies. A large effort goes into confirming that people plan on showing up to work and tracking those vacancies. When we know of a vacancy, we work to fill it. This will be no easy task, but our election board unit is starting the process now, earlier than usual. In the primary, we paid the poll workers an additional $100 as incentive pay, which we were able to do budgetarily because of the consolidated polling place. If we need to provide incentive pay again in November, it will cost $851,500. The election board unit is also working to secure locations for training and will begin trainings earlier than normal and hold more classes to reduce class size to allow for social distancing. We are also exploring an online training component similar to what other large jurisdictions have successfully implemented. One change from Act 77 that I'm afraid everyone has forgotten about, but could cause confusion at the polls in November, especially at the in-person locations, is the elimination of the straight party option from the ballot. Philadelphians are used to voting straight party. Indeed, about 52% of Philadelphians voters used the straight party option in the 2019 general election. Originally, I was hoping that we can conduct public education effort to inform voters of this change, but with COVID reappearing, it seems that mail-in ballots will be the dominant messaging this fall. So I ask that when you are meeting with folks, please remind them about this. In closing, I want to thank the staff of the Philadelphia City Commissioner's Office, who have been working throughout this pandemic and are nothing but dedicated and committed to the cause. I would also like to thank election staff workers throughout this Commonwealth who have been dealing with the crisis while performing their duties, often in an ever-changing environment. We are all working together to ensure Pennsylvanians have their right to a free, fair election and can have their voices heard on November the 3rd. Thank you for this opportunity to provide testimony.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is it the will of the group that we allow other commissioners to testify before we do Q&A? Is that all right?
Yes.
All right. Who else? Commissioner Smith? Commissioner Sabir? Either or. Got to unmute yourself.
For the sake of moving things along to questions, there's just two issues that I want to raise very quickly. Both regard legislation in Harrisburg. One has to do with how soon we can begin opening and processing those ballots. Waiting until Election Day is, in my opinion, much too late to begin physically processing them. The more work we can do before Election Day, the quicker we can begin counting on Election Day. The other is, and I realize this is well-intentioned, putting the date to apply for a mail-in ballot a week before the date that it is due back to us unintentionally disenfranchises voters. And it was hopeful it was something that was going to be addressed in the first round in election reforms in Act 77. If a voter does what they should do and they apply by Election Day, it's very possible that between the time even if we turn the ballot around in real time, the application in real time, and mail it out the next day, there's not enough time to make it to the voter and then back to the Board of Elections for their vote to be counted unless a couple different things are changed. Again, for the sake of brevity, I just wanted to raise those quick two issues.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Sabir?
Hello?
Hello.
Hey, how's everybody doing?
We're
Can you hear
good.
me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. I just wanted to thank you, Council. Definitely looking for your support. We're definitely trying to get the word out there. We need strategic outreach with strategic community partnerships, and it's definitely going to cost resources. We want TV commercials. We want social media buys. We're developing a mobile app. We have to inform and educate our voters. We have to inform and educate our poll workers, which will definitely increase and enhance the voting experience from our average voter. And again, we mentioned earlier, was our voter turnout definitely was higher. It was 32% for the last couple of presidential elections. We averaged about 20% for an uncontested presidential election. We were at 32%, which is very high. And I believe that we actually can do better with the more resources that's spent for TV commercials. We want ads on buses. We want billboards. We want to advertise. We want to explain to people how important it is to vote, their civic duty, and letting them know how to do it. It's very important so people don't feel disenfranchised. We're going to go over the rules. There's just across the country where we've seen a lot of mistakes on vote by mail ballots, which caused a lot of rejections. We saw in California over 100,000 vote by mail ballots were rejected from states, from people not signing them, not putting appropriate date on them. So that all goes to the education and the outreach program. And if we do that efficiently and we do it well, again, it will not disenfranchise our voters. So please, definitely need some more resources for outreach.
Okay, so I'm going to give members of the committee an opportunity to be recognized, but I'm going to ask 3 quick questions while people use that chat feature, and I'm going to call on Samantha to recognize them. The most pressing question I would have, based on the increased use of mail-in ballots, was there any increase in voter fraud?
No, Councilman Jones. Contrary to what we often hear about mail-in voting, the mail-in voting is pretty much fraud-free. We didn't see any increase or anything alarming about our mail-in ballot participation.
Second thing, I hear a lot about what internally the commissioner's office is going through. Is there any reason to plug in with the U.S. Post Office? Has that part of the process gone seamless?
We are working with our colleagues in United States Congress, our local Congress people, to arrange a dialogue between us and the Postal Service, because it is indeed an issue when, as Commissioner Schmidt pointed out, voters are doing exactly what we are instructing them that they can do by waiting until the end to apply for a ballot, but it is unrealistic. The post office, is also operating under very extraordinary circumstances. So we hope to be able to engage with the local post office, soon, in the coming weeks.
And I guess finally, I'm very pleased to hear that you are reevaluating polling locations and trying to increase the number of them. To the credit of the voting public, people patiently stood in line for hours to vote in some circumstances. And I understand that in a general election, we can anticipate greater volume and hopefully less delays. So I'm encouraged by the notion that you're looking at that. And the sooner we can help you publicize where polling locations are, the better. And with that, Samantha Williams, are there people looking to ask the commissioners questions?
Yes. So first council member up for questions is Councilmember Thomas.
Councilmember Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, commissioners. I want to start just by doing what probably so many of my colleagues will do, is just commend you for your work and your effort during this time. I can only imagine how difficult it was to deal with a process and a system that was so new to all of us, and then to have to deal with it during a pandemic. I can only imagine. So I commend you for the job you've done. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for convening this important conversation. I just wanted to start by asking about early voting centers. I'm a big advocate of it. I know you need resources to just execute the expected number of ballots that you're going to receive. But I think that it's important to at least have a conversation. So I was hoping to hear from you as to where you are with early voting centers and what you think, what you anticipate us being able to do.
Well, thank you so much, Councilman, and thank you for your help. You helped us out with some staff, and I appreciate that during a very, very busy time as we were trying to get those ballots out. So thank you so very much. As I stated in my testimony, the cost of satellite early voting centers are roughly about $140,000 each, and that doesn't include the staff to staff them. But we do recognize, as part of Act 77, that is an access to voting that we absolutely would love to be able to provide to Philadelphia voters. So ideally, we would like to see early voting centers in each council district. But we, like everything else that we are working on and preparing a plan for, it all depends on how much dollars we have in order to put these plans forward.
And we've been in regular conversations with the Pennsylvania Department of State about this. I mean, the money is a really, resources is a very important part of it, but also just the physical infrastructure to run dedicated lines to those locations. If anything can be accessed over the internet, it can be hacked into. So in order to have those early voting centers, or what are really in-person mail-in voting centers, requires a dedicated line, and we require the assistance of the Pennsylvania Department of State to get that done.
So thank you. I appreciate your response. So just listening to that and anticipating us possibly moving forward and actually doing that, how much work do you think it would save you if you were... So, how much work do you think it would save you and your offices if you were to have the early voting centers as an option for people who are in between, right? Like maybe they are a little uncomfortable voting by mail, but at the same time, they might be still a little concerned about the pandemic that we're facing. I just see the early voting centers as the happy medium. What would it take for us to get to the point? Because we have our state partners on the call and they're listening. So what would it take to get to the point to try to get us in a position where we can actually pull this off?
Well, understand it wouldn't save us any work. It would just increase our amount of work that we have to do, because it would require, as we've seen, actually we were just recently in Colorado, and they have a whole ballot collection team and a whole remote voting system where, we looked at it and it looks, like it's great, and it's wonderful to be able to offer Pennsylvanians and particularly Philadelphians another way to vote, where they might even feel safer or more at ease if they can go early and see a person and interact with somebody rather than get that mail ballot. We know that for some people, they're just not there yet to feel confident or comfortable filling that ballot out at home and putting it in a mail. But they may feel comfortable and confident if they were to go see somebody and see an actual person and have, an exchange with an individual from the Board of Elections. So it will not give us any less work. It will give us more work, and it will require us to identify staff to then go and staff these remote or in-person mail-in voting centers. And that will also require us to be able to have staff that will be there, nights and weekends. And then we have to work on the IT component, as Commissioner Schmidt mentioned. We also have to work on the ballot security issue, because you have to recognize that those ballots then are live voted ballots. So there's a whole chain of custody that will have to be worked out, and a whole team of people that are going to have to be dedicated just to the customer service, the customer interface, the voter interface with that, as well as supervising those employees and supplying them those locations with the necessary equipment, and then getting those ballots back, recognizing the need to maintain the integrity of the chain of custody.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that. And again, thank you for your work. If there's anything that I can do, if there's anything that we can do as a council body to help support you in this process, please let us know. I hear you when you talk about how big of an undertaking it will be. And, I think that can be part of the solution to help some of the anxiety that a lot of the voters have, so we can put us in a position where we are assuring that every vote counts and we're doing it in a timely fashion. Again, thank you so much. I appreciate all your work. And, of course, anything we can do to help you with this effort as far as voting. And I did hear Commissioner Sabir as well, as far as the importance of marketing and advertising. And I would love to brainstorm some possible areas where we could make that happen as well. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you, sir.
Thank you, Member Thomas. Ms. Williams, who's next?
Councilmember Gautier.
Member Gautier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I just have a few questions. During the June primary, the poll books were printed prior to the deadline for requesting a mail-in ballot. And so while counting votes, employees had to undertake the time-consuming process of manually confirming that people did not vote twice. How are we addressing this issue for the election this fall?
Well, so poll books have to be cut, in order for them to get, the tapes have to be cut in order for them to be able to get to the printer, to be printed, and then they have to be the need to reconcile the poll books is a huge challenge.
So just to clarify, we'll have to do that manual check again?
As of right now, yes.
Okay. Are we thinking of any ways to avoid that? And is it possible in any way?
We are working on ways to expedite it. And we are working on ways to make it less of a tedious process. It was made more difficult. It was made more difficult in the primary because the books were so voluminous. But with our ability to hopefully start sooner, that should really cut down the time that will take.
Okay. Commissioner Deely, in your testimony, you talked about using technology to help package, sort, and tabulate ballots. Can you talk more about the technology you're looking at procuring, the cost of the technology, and the efficiency this technology will bring to your operations?
Sure. So, as I stated earlier, we have been looking around the country at best practices. And what we found is that the jurisdictions where they have really amped up their mail-in voting, they've been able to do so by pretty much automating the entire process. So when we talk about equipment, we are talking about a sorter that is election specific, so that the ballots can be sorted and mailed out, and they can be electronically adjudicated. I mean, it just there's so much automation that goes into that. So instead of, for example, we need a high-speed printer that will print ballots much faster than what we saw in the primaries. We need to be able to stuff the envelopes through automation, so that the machine that we're looking to buy would stuff the ballot into the envelope, put the insert in, put the instructions in. It would go through the system, and it would all be done mechanically. And in addition, when we get the ballots back, it would also save us the need for bodies to sit and open envelopes and unpack them. So when we're talking about what we need a high-speed commercial industrial printer, specialized vote-by-mail inserter. That inserter is probably the most expensive piece. It could be over $1 million. We need a sorter capable of sorting up to 70 trays so that we can sort by word. And we need extractors, which will help us take the secrecy envelope and the ballot out of the envelopes. And then we need some additional scanners that will help us to count the ballots on a more high speed way.
Is there a deadline by which we would have to procure that equipment in order to be ready for the November election?
Councilman, we are working daily to make sure that with procurement, to make sure that we have that as soon as possible. But yes, we do recognize we are under a very, very real time crunch.
By when do you think we would need to have that equipment in order to use it for the November election?
We hope to have that equipment, by September, so that if it comes later, we are confident that we'll be able to get some help from the Revenue Department, because they have a mailroom down there at the MSB concourse that they might be able to help us get the initial run done of ballots to go out. And then as we're waiting for that deadline to pass, hopefully that we'll be able to stand up our own equipment so that when it comes back, it'll be there for us to help us count faster.
Okay. Can you talk about the level of coordination that happens between the city commissioners and the administration with regard to administering the election, and specifically with regards to the election in November? Is there some sort of steering committee that will meet regularly?
We do meet regularly. We started a steering committee that began when the city moved to purchase a new voting system, and that steering committee has continued formation throughout. So we will just continue to do that. We're now, as we get closer to the election, we meet on a more regular basis, weekly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. What I'd like to do now is recognize Representative Boyle, and for our state partners, the next three questioners will be from the state, if we can do that. Representative?
Thank you, Councilman Jones. Again, this is a very good discussion we're having about critical reforms. And thank you so much, Chairwoman Deely, for your testimony today, but also, more importantly, for stepping up to the plate in early June through a truly, truly unique and a unprecedented crisis. And I really tip my hat to you and also thank you. Thinking of the November election, obviously all eyes are going to be on the state of Pennsylvania, and we have implemented a new way of voting through a mail-in process or no excuse absentee voting. And I think we received an unprecedented and truly surprising amount of mail-in votes for the June primary. And there's a very good chance that that will be replicated for the November presidential election. What concerns me, and I think probably concerns many in the state of Pennsylvania, is a delay in terms of getting results on election night, which could actually hamper the ability of the major networks and the state to declare a winner for president. Obviously, we care about all the offices that are going to be voted on in November, but nationalized and internationalized are going to be on the numbers for president. And what is probably the worst scenario for us in the state of Pennsylvania, just dealing with the political demographics that are reality in the state, where we see central Pennsylvania, northeastern Pennsylvania, northwestern Pennsylvania, those rural areas of the state being Republican strongholds, and then Allegheny County being highly Democratic, and then us in the southeast, and most particularly the city of Philadelphia being Democratic strongholds. What concerns me and others is that we could possibly have a dynamic on election night where Trump is ahead, and we haven't yet counted our votes, or the overwhelming majority of our votes in the city of Philadelphia and also some of the suburban counties. Ultimately, when we do count our votes in Philly and also some of the suburban counties, we could have a different result in Pennsylvania than what the numbers look like on election night. I think everyone would be on the same page that we want to prevent that from happening. And I know I went and visited you right after the June primary in person, and you and I talked about our mutual concerns in this regard. And you had specifically mentioned the example of Wayne County, which the city of Detroit is located in Michigan, as being an example that we can replicate in Philadelphia to avoid the scenario that I just laid out. I was curious from you, what do you need from the city and state to replicate what you saw during your site visit to Wayne County in Detroit back in, I think you were there in February or March? What do you need from us to do that?
Well, as I told you, when I was talking about Detroit, they have, just so everybody knows, they count their ballots on election day night, but they have over 500 temporary employees that are hired overnight. They work overnight, sequestered, with no cell phone, no access to the outside world. They're at a convention center where they're all set up by division, and there's equipment at every division, a scanner and all that. But we looked at that and we think that the way they did that was pretty good. But we're prepared. After going to Colorado, we know that there are other ways to do it. All the ways require this automated equipment that we do not have. They require space, and the space requirement is even more critical when we look at the social distancing needs. I know I talk about it all the time. I'm like a broken record about the space, but I cannot stress enough how desperately we need space, and we will need even more space should we be successful in acquiring this much needed equipment. So we need equipment, and we need space to put the equipment, and we're going to need staff to help use the equipment, because basically the staff that we have is enough staff to stand up an election and to count ballots the way we have typically had to do it. But our whole world has been turned upside down, and now we are doing two different elections, one in person and one by mail, and they're both they both require completely different equipment, a completely different set of skill sets when we talk about the staffing needs, and money and space, and really that's what it all comes down to. And really, I would also say that it's not all, a lot of this is communication. What people don't realize is when we did the June primary, it was kind of like everybody was rushed into the mail ballot, right? People were waiting. They didn't know whether or not they should do it. They waited to see if maybe it was going to get better. We'd never been through a pandemic before. Maybe it'll get better. Maybe I can go to the polls. People were scared. They didn't know what to do. They waited long to apply for the mail-in ballot. Time is our friend right now. So the earlier people apply for the mail-in ballot, the earlier we can get that ballot out to them. And then that helps us too. The earlier we get them out, the earlier we get them back. And any change that happens in the legislature to allow us to begin canvassing earlier that's all things that we need. I mean, that's something that really doesn't cost anything that would make a huge difference. Just the ability to start earlier. I mean, right now, although we're able to start on election day, our staff is completely occupied with election day. But if we could start, doing stuff earlier and be more prepared for that, and people got their ballots back to us fast, their applications back to us sooner, we would get the ballots back faster. Time is our friend right now. And we should all, as elected officials and people that are talking to voters and, constantly in this conversation, we cannot stress enough how important it is to apply early and get your ballot back to us. It really would help everything.
Thank you, Chairwoman Deely. And as the Democratic chair of the House State Government Committee, I think it would be productive just for me to let everyone on this call know a little bit of the background in relation to when you can actually begin counting the mail-in votes. Right now, under Pennsylvania law, it is 7 a.m. on Election Day. We, the Democrats in the House State Government Committee, had actually lobbied for it to be Friday before the Tuesday general election. That was opposed by the Republican majority in the State House, so that's why there was a compromise that it would be on Election Day at 7 a.m. And then also just update you on legislation that has gone through our committee. There is a bill that has gone through the House State Government Committee, which would allow for opening all the envelopes that are basically the non-ballot envelope before 7 a.m. on Election Day. I really appreciate you really setting forth what you need, and I wrote it down, which was space. You need space, you need automated equipment, and you need staff. So I think you're making it very, and you need legislation too.
Yeah, and I would also add another reason why people waited longer to decide how to vote was, some of the conditions on Election Day and leading up to Election Day made a lot of people change their mind about whether they were going to go vote in person or by mail.
One last question, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but what would be the price tag that you believe that would cost? The space requirement, the automated equipment, and also the 500 temporary staff?
Well,
It can be a ballpark.
Yeah, the space I'm really not clear on, but I would say the equipment is probably about $4 million.
Okay. And then the 500 temporary staff?
Well, we would need full-time staff to operate that equipment right now based on it's election work, so it needs to be done by our unionized workforce.
Got it. Well, thank you very much, Chairwoman Deely, and you really gave us what we need to do. Thank you.
Representative Boyle, would you like to identify members of your caucus that would like to ask questions at this point?
Sure. Let me communicate with. Let me look at the chat. See who has a. Let me see who is on.
We're not allowed to use the chat, Kevin.
Oh, okay. Well, Representative Delicia, why don't you start off from the House State Government Committee?
Thank you. Appreciate that, Chairman. Thank you for this opportunity. Appreciate everybody's hustle, obviously, over leading up to June 2nd and trying to figure out how we could do it better, smoother for November 3rd. I've been in conversations with the Department of State, Chairwoman Deely, and I think they described satellite offices, and this may be oversimplifying it, or it may be a communication issue, as a VPN line, a virtual private network, so that, you know, if a county chose, whether it's Philadelphia, Montgomery County, I represent both, if a county chose to do a quote-unquote satellite office for the purposes of even getting mail-in ballot applications, they could put a tent up across from a church on a given Sunday with a virtual private network line. And from a former life of mine, a VPN line is not a super, super big deal. This would connect to the Shore system, and you've got a satellite. So I can appreciate what you were saying, but I specifically met with and asked the Department of State that question. So I'm concerned that there might be a little bit of a communication issue. And if there's any way that, you know, Chairman Boyle or any of us can help facilitate that communication so we're clear. I mean, I can appreciate the price tag that you were putting on what you're describing for a satellite office, but I was surprised that that would be acceptable to the department. And again, very happy to facilitate a further conversation so nobody's overthinking it. And the city is, you know, even within the 4th Councilmanic District, we cover a lot of territory. So, you know, everything from East Falls and a little bit of North Philly to Manayunk to Andorra, all the way over to the Delaware County line. So even one per Councilmanic District would certainly tax the geography of the 4th Councilmanic District. But I don't know if you have any reaction to that. But again, I'm just putting it out there so that if you'd like to continue the conversation, happy to help. And then one quick question about the poll books. When I dropped into polling places on election day, the because we consolidated polling books, the A to L's had tremendous lines, and folks would tell me that was an all-day event. The M to Z line was practically non-existent. So I don't know if there's a way to set it up so that if we do consolidate, and I know we're hoping there isn't consolidation, but if there is even any consolidation, if we could take a look at those polling books to be organized differently, might facilitate some of these lines moving a little quicker. But that was my observation, one of my observations on election day. Thank you, everyone.
So could you identify, are you going to respond to that, Commissioner?
I was just going to say thank you, and we will definitely be in touch with the representative with regard to the VPN. Our conversations with the state are, everyone's still trying to figure out the VPN. So we will look forward to that. Yep.
Happy to help, Commissioner, honestly, Chairwoman. Thank you.
Representative Boyle, can you identify one more, and then we'll go back, alternating city, state, city, state.
Sure. We are good right now from the House State Government Committee.
Samantha Williams, who from the city side is teed up?
Councilmember Green.
Member Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for convening such an important hearing this afternoon. Also, I want to thank Madam Chair, as well as your fellow commissioners, for being here this afternoon. All of the work that you've been doing regarding this issue, especially during COVID-19, when we had such a disruption of our normal lives, especially the election process. I think one of the issues that I've been hearing, and we've chatted, and I think so many people are concerned because voting is such an important fabric of our lives as citizens in not only the city, the state, but this nation. And this fall's election takes on a very significant importance. And for so many, not being able to physically vote was very jarring because of COVID-19. Some of my colleagues in this body are familiar with the stories I've given about my grandfather who only wore a suit to go to church and to vote. And so I guess part of some of the perspective, and I can't speak for some of the people that raised concerns, is everyone's trying to make sure that we are allowing everyone to have their franchise of voting protected for this fall. So one of the questions I've been hearing, and I understand that the commissioners have been getting more information out, but regarding some of the procedural guidelines that may be needed, what steps do you think will occur to kind of get that information out to the public regarding various aspects of the voting process going into the fall? I know you've been visiting various locations. You talked about Wayne County and Detroit and other locations, and you learned a lot from this past election. But what would you say in reference to trying to get more information out from a procedural perspective of how the election process will occur this fall?
Well, Councilman, thank you. And thank you also because you and I have chatted quite frequently about our situation here with the November election. Of course, we always want to do everything we can to get the information out to the voters, but we are challenged by the lack of clarity. So, it's hard to push out procedures when there are still unanswered questions going through the legislature. There are changes that have not yet been hammered out. There is guidance from the state that we're still waiting on. So we get into a difficult position where, to the public, it seems as though we're withholding information or we're not telling people, everything they need to know. But from our standpoint, we don't really have the final answer. We don't have the definitive process. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know, if we're going to be able to start to count the ballots early. We don't know if there's going to be any changes to election day. So we're kind of limited. The one thing, what we do know is that the deadlines are set and people should start applying now, and they should work to get their ballot back to us as soon as possible. That we know. We also know that we will be standing up an in-person election. It is our great hope, and we are doing everything based on that and the fact that we need to have as many polling places open as possible for the presidential general election. We know people should make that decision, whether they're going to vote by mail or vote in person. And they should right now check their voter registration, and they should make sure that they're registered to vote and they're able to participate in the process. And we have done, and we will continue to push out the information that we can at this point. But it's hard for us to really, even when it comes to where's my polling place going to be, we have to wait until we know for certain, because we risk adding more confusion if we tell people one thing and now it's the end of August and it's changed again. So we're always walking a fine line between not being like people thinking that we're not giving out information or giving out too much information that could then confuse voters and unintentionally disenfranchise them.
Thank you for that response. That provides a lot more context of all the challenges you're dealing with a lot of changes at the state level that you're trying to deal with, as well as get information out to the public in the best form possible. I'm glad that our colleagues from the House are on this call so they can hear some of this information and participate. They bring a different perspective than being in Harrisburg regarding some of the issues and concerns they see at a Commonwealth-wide level. But I wanted to follow up on the question that was asked by Democratic Chair Representative Boyle in reference to the cost factor. I know that some of the things you talked about $4 million for equipment, we talked about 500 staff, the space issues, and I know it's somewhat challenging maybe in this form to provide the full and detailed budget. But is there any way that you can communicate that information to City Council as well as the administration? I know you had made requests during the budget process. We're not sure how our finances may change in the coming weeks as we're still lobbying at the federal level for additional federal dollars for state and local revenue reimbursement. But is there an ability to provide that information to both the legislative and executive branch regarding some of those concerns? And then I also am not sure if there are any opportunities at the state level throughout the Commonwealth, because just like we're having these challenges here in Philadelphia, I'm sure these issues are also happening in Allegheny County and Erie County and Montgomery County, Chester, Bucks, Delaware, Potter County, Center County, Elk. You can go through the list of the 67 counties in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Yes, we will put something together with cost estimates that we've been able to determine through our work and our research. I would also add that the 500 temps that Detroit needs, that number would be greatly reduced. We wouldn't need that much in Philadelphia because the equipment will eliminate the need for a lot of the temporary staff that does a lot of the laborious work of opening the envelopes and whatnot.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Chair, thank you for this hearing today.
Thank you.
Councilman,
Yes.
Councilman, if I could just add to that. In Denver, Denver has 400,000 voters, and their budget is $10 million. And we have about 1 million voters. Our budget is about $10 million. So Denver just making that commitment, to the voting process. And again, we asking you guys to make this commitment.
I'm sorry, this is the court reporter. Who was that just speaking?
Omar, Commissioner.
That was Commissioner Sabir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sabir. Duly noted. Also, looking forward how we can work with you and Councilmember Thomas, as well as the other members of council and our state representative and even state senate counterparts to help work and get the information out regarding the election in the fall through social media and other means to really try to educate the citizens of the city of Philadelphia. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Green. Ms. Williams, are there any
Councilmember Squilla.
Vice Chair Squilla.
How are you? Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Samantha. I do want to thank the commissioner and her team, all the commissioners, for a job well done under the circumstances. It was very difficult, but I did go around Election Day looking at some of the polling places, and you're right, the workers that were there in the time frame that we had with the unrest and with the pandemic and everything else that's going on, did a tremendous job, and they should be thanked and praised for everything that they did. My question, and a lot of my questions were answered already by previous questions, but the one that we talked about, people filing for an absentee or a mail-in ballot late, and then the books being printed, even though some people filed after the books were being printed. Is it possible, if we don't have the technology or if we don't have the iPads at hand, to be able to have a sign-in on a virtual sign-in? Can we have an iPad available, even if we have books, where they could just check on site if that person was already applied for a mail-in ballot and whether it was received or not?
So the supplemental poll sheets that we deliver to the polling locations have the most up-to-date, which would be from the time the poll books were printed to the deadline, and we get those out to the polling places. The issue is that, especially in June, some of the poll workers never, didn't see them, didn't look at them, so because they were so overwhelmed, but like I said, by the books being so voluminous, and this Department of State is working with us to find a way to better signify those particular individuals. it's a training issue. So, I mean, if we were to introduce something new right now, it would be counterproductive because we're in a situation where we have to teach them so much before November already with the Act 77 and the mail-in voting, and we have to make sure that they. Another thing I didn't even get to mention. I mean, we gave them all this PPE and just in a box, right? So this time we're going to be able to explain to them that, what the PPE is for, what they should be doing when the voters come in. So we don't want to overwhelm them. I do believe that the training aspect will make a big difference in that the double voting issue that we saw in June.
Are we looking to do the training virtually this time, knowing that we probably won't be able to do it in a room again?
Right now, we are planning to do both. We're trying to do in person in smaller numbers because some of our poll workers they're just not going to do the virtual for whatever reason. But we are also looking at a virtual training program that we've seen in other jurisdictions. That is something that we are working on right now.
Are we also looking to keep the same polling places from the primary to the general, or are we looking to expand to have more locations?
We are looking to stand up the election day in a typical fashion, similar to what we saw in November of last year, having every division stand up on its own. We do know that we will lose polling locations that are no longer available to us because of the pandemic, but the divisions right now, as of today, will stand up on their own.
I think that'll be easier too, knowing that I think the amount of people that you'd have to go through to look to see if they had put in a mail-in ballot or not would be a lot easier. So if they do have that sheet and it's not on an iPad or not virtual, they could just say, all right, did you mail in your vote or did you not? And then they could do a provisional ballot or.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the books that we used in the zone format were so voluminous that it was a challenge for our poll workers. But now the books will be just printed for the division, so hopefully that'll be a big help.
And I know you stated earlier in the hearing that as far as mailing out everybody a mail-in ballot application, the cost of that. But the best way to do it is online if possible. If we do, can we have counties help with that? Can we have, I know individual people who are running for office sent out applications for people to do mail-in ballots. Is there a way to collaborate with people so that we don't have 20 different people sending out applications for mail-in?
I wish there was, and I fear, Councilman, that's going to be a huge challenge for us as we get to November. I mean, I've already heard myself personally of 3 different groups that are going to be mailing applications. So it's going to be a challenge similar to the voter registration, and people say, oh, you're not, somebody says, oh, you're not registered. Look, your name's not here. And then people don't think they're registered, so they register again, or they don't get their card fast enough, so they think we didn't get it, so they register again. We're going to see that issue, unfortunately, with the mail-in ballot applications, I'm sure.
Yeah, and if we can encourage them to do it online, like you said, it's easier to process and get through than the manual ones. Not sure if these third parties are going to be doing that also, because I did receive them to my home, and even names that I don't even know who they are, but saying you're not registered, and we see that you're not registered at this address. Right. So, there's going to be some confusion there, and hopefully that doesn't add to the problems that people think that there might be inequities in the process. But I really appreciate everything you've done. Looking forward to continue to working with you and our state legislators to make sure that November's process is, if not as smoother than the primary. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Squilla. Ms. Williams.
Councilmember Sanchez.
Member Sanchez. Member Sanchez. Maybe she will join us back. Who do you have next?
There were no other council members who indicated that they wanted to be recognized in the chat.
Well, with that, I think you've done a really good job of crystallizing where things are and where potentially both good and bad they can be. I'm very pleased that our state partners were able to hear that and be able to be helpful moving forward. So thank you all for your testimony. Feel free to stay on the line just in case other issues come up. But thank you.
Thank you all. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Ms. Williams, the next panel to testify.
Okay. Next up, we have Pat Christmas, Susan Almeida, and Muriel McCarthy.
Thank you guys for your patience. Don't forget to take your button off mute and state your name for the stenographer and begin your testimony, please.
Okay, I'll go first. Pat Christmas, Policy Director for the Committee of 70. I'm happy to be here. Also understand we have a bit of a time crunch, so I'll keep my comments brief. And, thank you, Councilman Jones, for helping organize this and members of the committee for having this public discussion, obviously around of all the crises that the country and the state and the city are dealing with. This is the one that's right in front of us, and we are running out of time to properly prepare. And, Representative Boyle was not wrong in that without the proper investment and the planning and the collaboration that has to take place before the November election, if we basically just repeat what we did in June, we're going to have a disaster in our hands. So it is urgent that these things are taken care of. And I have to acknowledge the fact that the city commissioners and their staff worked extremely hard, long hours on weekends for weeks and weeks and weeks to try to pull off the June primary. And even with their best efforts, there were a lot of problems and a lot of folks were disenfranchised. So that's why this is urgent. And again, thank you again for having the space to talk about this. The commissioners are also correct in that they have to run two major elections at the same time. Other states that predominantly vote by mail have had years to switch over their operations, and also critically for the electorate to get comfortable voting that way. We're having to do this overnight, right? And we're having to do this overnight also in the middle of a pandemic and all sorts of other political noise that's out there. So the scale is substantial, and the commissioners are also correct in that they need this equipment. It's at least $2 million worth of equipment just for vote by mail. These are the things that will put the ballot packs together accurately, efficiently, quickly, sort them for the U.S. Postal Service. Also, when the ballots come in, to sort them, open them quickly, and get them ready to scan. Part of the reason this equipment is necessary is not just for the sake of minimizing staffing costs, but because there are surges here. It's an additional challenge in just fact of life with elections, in that mail-in applications don't come in all at the same time. Voter registration applications don't come in all at the same time, and the ballots don't come in all at the same time. And the surges, especially as the deadlines draw near, is where we risk disenfranchisement. So, the equipment's critical. The space is needed too. Allegheny County had a whole warehouse where they could line up their equipment just the way they needed, and work things efficiently. We had to squeeze things into our regular Delaware and Spring Garden office as best we could, and folks were crunched together there. The other critical components of the vote by mail election that has to be run, and these are outlined in our written testimony, are the drop-off options and the early voting sites. Now, some of this is being litigated right now, and of course the General Assembly hasn't finalized and negotiated their changes to the election code either. But we have to plan right now, given what we do know. And the early voting sites and the drop-off locations are essential pieces of a vote-by-mail system. And the reason is this. I mean, we want to obviously minimize the number of people who are showing up on Election Day, especially during these pandemic conditions. So the early voting sites, some number of early voting sites in each council district, and also, informed by the voter data, will be needed. They also provide an opportunity for people to get replacement ballots. And this is something that we had a lot of trouble with in the spring, because this was a brand new system. Folks either didn't get their ballot at all. That happened to some number of people, a small number, but some number of folks. or if they had, the ballot got damaged or they made a mismark on it, they need a chance to replace that. That's something that can happen at the early voting locations. And the drop-off boxes, however those are allowed, given the law and litigation that we're dealing with, those are important because of the deadlines. I mean, we heard from a lot of folks who they weren't sure at what point they could confidently put their ballot in the mail and it would be, get back in time, which is why, on the legislative side, it's so important that we have a postmark deadline and not a received by deadline, because that's a really, really uncomfortable place to put voters, and a lot of people got clipped by those deadlines in June. I mean, thousands of voters have been clipped by these deadlines for years now. So just on the vote by mail side, I mean, we could be looking at 300, 400,000 people voting by mail potentially. It's that scale that the commissioners really need this equipment and the space to deal with. Just a couple quick remarks about the in-person voting situation, which we've already discussed extensively. It is a good thing that we're not going to have the massive consolidation we had in the fall. That does have a suppressive effect. It's tougher for people to get around the corner to the church or the rec center or the school that they usually go to. So that's a good thing. The challenge will be getting the spaces filled. Pennsylvania is one of several states in the country where we still elect our poll workers. Government employees can't fill in those slots either. Both those conditions are in our state constitution. We're going to have to come back to that next session. But one of the things that we need the General Assembly to do, if they're not going to allow limited polling place consolidation, then they do have to, at a minimum, allow poll workers to be assigned anywhere within a given county. So that our county boards of election and our city commissioners can make sure these places are fully staffed. I mean, 700 or 800 polling places, 1,700 precincts means 8,500 positions that need to be filled. So it is a good thing that in this in-person election that we're running, we're going to be back to something more typical of a usual election as far as polling places, but the staffing is going to be a real challenge. The last thing I'll name, again, keeping in mind that time is short, is that and Councilman, you named this at the outset. Communications and voter outreach is going to be critical. Two basic reasons. One is that when you change voting procedures, they don't have the same impact on all voters. There's always a disproportionate impact. One of the things we saw in the primary is that communities of color did not use mail-in voting at the same rate. A number of different reasons for that, but they didn't use it at the same rate. And further, they applied later in the process, and therefore were more subject to the tight deadlines and the crush of processing that had to happen at the very end. So that's just hard on the street communications using everything we got. That's 17 council offices, the administration, the Philly Council infrastructure, civic groups, community organizations, businesses. Everybody has got to be all on top of these voting procedures once they're clear. And they aren't entirely clear yet. Once they are clear later this summer, that has to be a top priority. The other thing you named was the fact that there will be unfounded allegations of widespread voter fraud and election fraud. And, we know it's coming, right? So we have to make sure that the trusted messengers are there. A new initiative, Vote Safe PA, actually just launched this week. Credible Republican and Democratic messengers who are going to speak to the fact that, our elections aren't perfect. And here in Pennsylvania, they're actually in many ways, they're quite old and antiquated the way we run them. But widespread fraud is not one of our problems. And that's something we'll have to speak to. So we do have a lot on our plates. The commissioners did cover a lot of the details. It is true that they have to run two big elections at the same time. That will need more money, and that will need more equipment and space. But there does have to be a plan, right? And the commissioners, I believe, are working on this because, and these questions came up earlier. We need to know exactly what equipment so we can procure that right now. I mean, that's really at the top of a list of really urgent needs. That's at the very top. We need to know how many early voting sites, how many drop-off locations, how much those will actually cost, and then. Ultimately, I think a degree of collaboration we have not had in the city of Philadelphia around elections, ever before. Really, this is the most challenging election perhaps we've ever had to run, right? For all the reasons we know, and the city commissioners need city council, they need the administration, they need the state, and they need all the other stakeholders around the table to make this happen. So again, I very much appreciate you and the committee taking time this afternoon to provide a public forum about this. Of course, happy to answer any questions now or later.
Thank you for your testimony. Please stick around. We're going to let the second participant in the panel testify, and then we'll open up for questions. Please state your name for the record and begin your testimony.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Suzanne Almeida. I'm the interim executive director for Common Cause Pennsylvania. It is great to be here. It's such an important conversation. And I really appreciate that we are taking the time to focus in on what needs to happen to make November a success. I want to lift up something that Pat just said, which is about teamwork, right? We know that this is going to be a complicated election. We know that there are a million different things, A, that have to be done that are technical, B, that have to be communicated to voters and then back to the elections officials, and C, that have to work between elected officials at the state, county, and federal levels, right? So this is not an easy thing to do. All of that being said, I really want to emphasize the need for open and transparent communication between elected officials, our city commissioners, voters, and advocates, right? This is a two-way street. And so I think it's really important that in the midst of all of the other things that our city commissioners are doing, and I commend them deeply for the work that they have done to educate voters, to manage the minutia that is not small, it's just a lot of it, of running an election, to deal with changing election regulations. I commend them for all of that work, but I would encourage us as we go into November to really take a hard look at how we are communicating with the public expressly, right? So we know that just like we are having here today, it's important that the public and advocates have an ability to ask questions and get responses. We know that published meetings make a difference. We know that taking the time, even though that time is so precious and so valuable, to actually respond to public questions, to answer the phone, to talk to people who are having a problem, whether it be an advocate like myself, or more importantly, a voter who has an issue. I think all of that is really important. And sometimes that piece, I know, at least for me, when I'm in the midst of the craziness of trying to respond in the crazy of an election, it gets lost. But there is such an important role in just communicating with voters specifically. So to that end, I would just outline kind of the four key prongs that Common Cause thinks when we're looking at kind of how we want to engage with the public. So one is public notice, the second is public observation, the third is public participation, and then the fourth is public deliberation. So allowing members of the public to be part of these decision-making conversations, right? And we know that that's important not just because we want people to feel part of their government and to hold their government accountable, but it actually leads to better decision making. Which brings me to my second point, and I want to echo a lot of what Pat said and what we've heard earlier today. There are a list, a relatively short list of things that we can do, policy changes that can happen at the state legislature level that will make our elections run more smoothly in November. First and foremost is making sure that we are allowing pre-canvassing of ballots to start earlier than that 7 a.m. on election day, and I think that responds to a lot of concerns across the board, including those of Chairman Boyles in getting those election results out. While we know it's more important to have correct election results than fast election results, if we can get someplace in the middle of those two and get the most accurate results as quickly as possible, that's obviously the best option. The second is extending the deadline to return those mail-in ballots. So making sure that as long as they're postmarked by election day, they can be returned up to 7 days after that, which is going to capture those universe of people who decide later that they want to vote by mail for whatever reason, right? And then moving on to the in-person voting, I think that while I very much hope that we are able to stand up an election where we have all of our polling locations open, where we are fully staffed, I think that we need to start contingency planning now to what happens if that isn't possible, right? Despite the best efforts of everyone, we know that we are in the midst of a public health crisis. We're in the midst of a public health crisis that seems to be getting worse instead of better at this current point in time. And so we need to be aware that what happens in November, while we can plan for the best, we also have to plan for the worst. So what if we have to consolidate our polling places, what are the parameters around that? How do we make sure that they are consolidated in a way that doesn't disenfranchise voters? How do we make sure that, say, no more than 5,000 voters are consolidated into any single polling place? How do we make sure that, if possible, those consolidated polling places are located in easy public transportation, are located in places that communities can actually reach, and that they are staffed appropriately with trained poll workers to make that process possible. It's not easy, and I'm not trying to say that it will be, but I do think that, as with many things, if we start contingency planning earlier, it's going to make the process better at the end. And finally, and this is a request kind of both for council and for the General Assembly, and if we have any of our friends on the federal level listening to us today, I think that it is absolutely essential that we fully fund our elections infrastructure. Elections infrastructure is criminally underfunded across the country, and I think that that's really evident in Pennsylvania, both at the state level and at the city council level. This is a cornerstone of our democracy, and all of these changes that we're talking about, this contingency planning, this customer service, is making sure that we can cut out time to engage with the public if they have questions or concerns. All of that requires resources, and those resources have to come from somewhere, right? We cannot draw blood from a stone. We have to make sure that the commissioners who are doing yeoman's work of running the infrastructure of our democracy have the ability to do that. And so I will leave it there. There's obviously more to talk about, but I know that we are short on time, so I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I just want to thank you both for your advocacy. I've had an opportunity to participate in both nonprofits. I go way back to what was his name? Just retired from the Committee of 70. So take it off, move. Take your mic.
Zach Stolberg and Ellen Kaplan were
Yes.
with us before. Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate what you guys do to keep things honest and keep things keep going. And so thank you. Ms. Williams, do we have any questions?
I do not see any council members in the chat who wish to ask questions at this time.
So also Fred Voigt.
Fred, yep.
Hey, come on now.
Three decades. That's right. That was before my time, Councilman.
Yeah, that's all right. It was before a lot of people's time, but it's okay. All right, but thank you, and please stay engaged. We're going to need you. I know nobody, whether you're talking about a sports analogy, nobody likes losing a game, but they really don't like it when they don't think the referee was playing fair. And we're at a critical juncture with the division in this country that one thing we got to prove is that the game was fair. And so we count on you for that. All right? Thank you so very much. Ms. Williams, can you bring forth the last panel, I believe? Ms. Williams?
Is Muriel McCarthy on the call? She was a part of this panel.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. McCarthy. So I only saw 2 images. So, okay.
Hi there.
Hi, state your name.
Good afternoon, Chairman and committee members. Thank you for calling this important hearing on Philadelphia's elections and for this opportunity to testify. My name is Muriel McCarthy, and I'm a resident of Philadelphia. I'm speaking on behalf of Protect Our Vote Philly, a nonpartisan coalition of organizations and individuals such as myself who are working to make sure that we have free and fair elections in Philadelphia. You may have seen our letter to the city commissioners on July 8th, signed by over 24 organizations, including Juntos, Power, CMAC, and NAACP PA State Conference. We are testifying today to raise election security issues noted in that letter, as well as a number of other issues that we hope will be answered in this hearing and future hearings. Resolution number 200376 outlines several important concerns related to the delayed counting of mail-in ballots in last month's primary. However, there are a number of other significant issues in urgent need of solutions before November. There are 4 areas of concern that I'll speak to, including the solutions we urge the city commissioners to adopt. Number 1, paper mail-in ballot applications were not accessible to all voters. It was a prohibitively difficult and lengthy process to procure a paper ballot application for those without access to the internet, computer, or printer. This issue was exacerbated by library closings, which removed access to public computers and the lack of communication and outreach. This particularly affected older voters who are at the greatest risk if exposed to COVID at polling places. The solution: a paper mail-in ballot application should be sent to every registered voter in Philadelphia, or at the very least, the commissioners should send applications upon request and carry out widespread outreach to ensure voters and organizers are aware of this option. 2, drop-box locations were limited and confusing. Especially given the risk associated with public transit during this pandemic, drop boxes were often inaccessible to those who needed them most, those who lived farthest away from the best-known location, which was outside of City Hall. That location was made yet more inaccessible with a heavy police and military presence in response to recent protests. Other locations were announced at the last minute and had varying dates, times, and locations, leading to widespread confusion. Solution: secure ballot drop-box locations should be established throughout the city, preferably at each polling location, and should be announced clearly and concisely at least 2 weeks before Election Day. Number 3, vote counting was mismanaged and oversight was lacking. Ballots were exposed to alteration and damage during canvassing. When damaged ballots needed to be duplicated, this duplication occurred without adequate supervision. Watchers were prohibited from recording what they saw and were kept too far away to adequately observe the canvass. These concerns were outlined in greater detail in an open letter to the city commissioners on July 8th, which city council members received. Solution: there should be clear written policies that govern the canvass process and allow for close, verifiable observation by certified watchers and the public through available technological means. 4, vote counting was delayed. The canvass of all votes took nearly 2 weeks in June, barely meeting the legal deadline, but thankfully it did. Most of this time was not taken by scanning, but by ballot preparation, including several days delay to check for possible double votes. This delay was caused by the failure of the electronic poll book purchase and lack of poll worker training. A similar delay on a larger scale in November could be catastrophic. Solution: poll worker training and procedures must be improved. Board staff should do as much preparation of mail-in and absentee ballots for counting as the law permits before polls close, so they can be scanned as quickly as possible after polls close. More high-speed scanners can help accelerate this process. Taken together, these problems threaten the integrity of our elections. They have the potential to disenfranchise thousands of voters, can cast doubt on our election's validity, and expose our results to lawsuits. But the city commissioners have the power to solve them. On the issue of funding, we understand that more may be required in order to implement solutions. Any increases in funding to the commissioners must be accompanied by increases in transparency in how this money is used. To note, number 1, Philadelphia spends twice as much per voter on election administration compared to the median of the 15 largest counties in PA. 2, commissioners spent $29 million on voting machines last year in Philadelphia, the poorest big city in America, when better options would have saved millions of dollars. The city controller issued a report that noted undue influence by the vendor. Commissioners have never presented cost projections for the various additional expenses they foresee, such as increased costs for handling mail-in ballots versus operating expenses for the voting machines. Therefore, we recommend first thoroughly investigate past spending of the City Commissioner's Office to ensure taxpayer dollars were spent appropriately. And second, we recommend involving the City Controller's Office to ensure accountability to the public on how taxpayer money will be spent going forward. In closing, in the upcoming public meetings, we ask that you investigate these issues and request a committed plan from the Commissioner's Office on how they will work to address them. We would like to emphasize that if funding is to be provided, it is done so with a detailed audit on how taxpayer dollars will be spent. Thank you very much and have a good day.
I want to thank you for your testimony, but I want to also thank you for your format. It is so rare that testimony is presented with a problem and then a potential solution attached. I do appreciate that. And it
Thank you very much.
Was
We
it
appreciate that.
Was it submitted in writing?
Yes, it was.
All right, then we have it.
We look forward to working with City Council and the Commissioners. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Do we have any questions teed up, Ms. Williams?
I believe that some of the state representatives had questions, particularly Representative Boyle.
Representative Boyle, please proceed.
Thank you, Councilman Jones. Just adjusting my phone again. Thank you for the panel being here. Serving in the State House, we deal with a quite ideologically conservative Pennsylvania Republican House caucus. I don't think that's a surprise to many people. And often we deal with misinformation. And during debate related to allowing for the early counting of votes back in October, we heard concerns from Republican members of the State House that if we allowed for earlier counting than Election Day of the mail-in votes, that there would be rampant reporting of the outcome to elections before actually having Election Day. This is despite other states doing exactly that, and we on the House State Government Committee, at least on the Democratic side, couldn't find any examples of what Republicans were concerned about. I was interested if the people who just testified, Committee of 70, Common Cause, and Protect Our Vote, if they had any knowledge that early vote tabulations allowed for voting results to get out to the media and the broader public before the polls close at 8 p.m. on election night. Thank you, Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Representative Boyle.
Yeah, I'll dive in first. Thank you for that question, Representative. It's an important one because there's some legitimate concerns about elections out there, and there's some illegitimate ones. Other states, as you said, do this securely and safely. So Pennsylvania should be as well. With regards to someone within an elections office doing something they shouldn't do and letting results sneak out. I saw an election director quoted a few weeks ago as saying he's never met a candidate worth going to jail for. We're not concerned at all. Again, other jurisdictions do this safely and securely, and it is something that we need here in Pennsylvania to avoid, a delay in getting results in.
Yeah, this is Suzanne from Common Cause. I would echo all of that. We don't have any concerns with things being released early. I would echo what you said, Chairman Boyle, about the level of disinformation and misinformation that's out there. And I think I just want to take the opportunity to really lift up the onus on everyone on this call. We are all folks who talk to people about elections, who people look to as trusted messengers about elections. And I think anything we can do to bring election security and the right to vote out of a partisan framework and into a democracy framework, right? This is a cornerstone of our democracy. We want safe, secure, and accessible elections for everyone, regardless of which party you vote in. I think that is ultimately going to get us further. And this is not in response to anything you said, just in general. One of my soapbox issues is when people try to attach the right to vote to a partisan D or an R, and that's just not the way our country was founded.
Is that it?
I'd like to make a remark. From Protect Our Vote Philly, we do have a couple of instances where there was issues at the poll worker level. So I think what's really important is that we make sure that there are strict rules about not reporting any information outside of the commissioner's office, any during the canvass, so that there has to be the felony, and also we have to make sure that that if we are the most time-consuming part of processing the election is the processing of the ballots, as we all know, right? And the shortest period of time is in the scanning of the ballots, the counting. And if we get high-speed scanners, as the commissioners are wishing to get, which is a great idea, we can do the counting within days. So we won't know if anything's been leaked. And I think that's one of our concerns is, how do you find out? And it's going to be especially important in the primaries. So not so much in the general. It's going to affect local elections probably more than the general elections. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Representative Boyle, does that cover?
Yeah, thank you to the panel. And, I don't think there are any examples that critics of allowing for an early vote tabulation can cite on any sort of mass level of vote tabulations getting out there. And I appreciate the contributions of the panel. Thank you, Councilman Jones.
Thank you. Ms. Williams.
I believe there was another state rep who would like to be recognized. State Rep Hohenstein.
Are you there, Representative?
Yep. Thank you, Council Member. My question is relating to what are going to be the best systems for us to use for that pre-canvassing. One of the things that was tossed around when we talked about pre-canvassing in the State Government Committee in Harrisburg was literally taking the uncounted ballots and placing them into an empty prison cell in the county prison. And this was one of the mechanisms that some of the folks in other counties were thinking about. And I know we're not going to do that in Philly, but what I would like to know, and we can take the conversation later, but I would love to hear from any of these panelists if there are specific mechanisms that have been used, specific statutory language that is used in other states that have mail-ins where they do a pre-canvassing or a pre-opening of the ballots and then a counting later. What is the systems that have been the most effective in other places so that we don't have a free-for-all with some counties having good, strong, secure systems and other counties sticking ballots in prison cells?
Yeah. Thank you, Representative. Well, first, it is important that all counties are doing things the same way, fortunately, it's not just a few other states and jurisdictions that manage the pre-canvass process safe and securely. 2/3 of states allow some version of this, and there is some variation. I mean, in California, they can start opening envelopes, I believe, almost 30 days out. In some states, it's like on a rolling basis. As a ballot comes in, they're able to open and pre-process it. So there are a number of examples to look at. I don't have those specifics to talk about right now, but we can certainly pull those together. And I think if anything, I mean, to your question and Representative Boyle's question, there are a lot of different ways to do this well, and we know that because you look pretty much anywhere else in the country, and they can manage it. So we can certainly sidebar the specifics.
Yeah, please do. Because we know we don't get a whole lot of time to turn around and present our positive proposals in Harrisburg because of the partisan nature of the committee. We often have less than 24 hours to effectively provide amendments or proposals to make some of these pieces of legislation better. So the sooner we're able to talk, the better.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
Thank you, Representative. Ms. Williams.
I think we can move on to the next panel of witnesses.
Thank you all for your testimony.
Judith Max Palmer, Brenda Shelton Dunstan, John Zimmerman, Emma Tramble and Sergio Cia. And we also will need to at some point connect another witness by phone.
Okay, thank you for your patience. Please state your name for the record and begin your testimony.
Hi, my name is Judith Max Palmer. Good afternoon. I'm a committee person in the 46th ward. A lot of the comments that I was going to make have already been addressed, so I just want to reiterate them briefly. Yes, please eliminate that secrecy envelope. Please start processing ballots earlier, if at all possible. The multiple poll books, I noticed, generate a lot of confusion and delay. I know there is an electronic version available, and we should absolutely use it if possible. And yes, City Commission must have the staff to process ballots swiftly. Please send mail-in ballots to all voters and encourage voters to send their ballots in as soon as they've made their decisions. Many voters don't realize that sending ballots in early can expedite the process. The number of people that we had to redirect from the Christie Rec Center was shameful. Many had been told that they could drop off mail-in ballots at our polling place after having already been redirected to a weekend drop-off location from yet another polling place. So these folks had to be sent in turn to the Blackwell Library. That's 4 stops for a mail-in ballot. I wonder how many were dropped in the trash because the voter was late for work. We need drop-off boxes for early and day of voting at every polling place, clearly marked what they're there for, who can use them. We also need more early voting centers, and they need to have evening and weekend hours. But watching voters get sent from one polling place to another has been a consistent and infuriating feature of every election I've seen since taking my office. Please, I want to take a page from the book of Ms. McCarthy and provide a solution. Please equip each polling place with a tablet so that people can look up their polling places. At the very least, have each polling place assign one person the task of helping people look up their polling place instead of just any given poll worker sending any given voter to wherever they think might be that voter's polling place. People kept saying that they've been sent from place to place to place, and this happens every single year, twice a year. I know that 66 wards announced that the consolidation of polling places cost Philadelphia almost 20,000 votes in the primary. We can't risk a proportionate undercount this fall. Many committee people, I'm going to give another solution if possible. Many committee people are eager to assist with voter education and turnout and outreach and process support. We are grossly underutilized. If you can help us serve, then we will have better results, and Philadelphia deserves those results quickly and accurately. Thank you for your time.
No, thank you for your participation. We appreciate it. Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I am here. Hello, Chairman Jones and members of the Legislative Oversight Committee. My name is Brenda Shelton Dunstan, and I am here to testify today on Resolution 200376. I'm coming to you as the Executive Director of the Philadelphia Black Women's Health Alliance, a public health professional, a committee person, a past poll watcher, advocate, and most important of all, as a citizen of the United States who has a right to vote during election, as do other citizens in the U.S. I successfully exercised my option to vote by mail-in ballot during the primary. However, that was not the case for others who attempted to enroll in and use the ballot. The primary election occurred at a time, as we're talking about, when COVID-19 was disproportionately impacting the Black community due to increased vulnerability based on chronic health disparate conditions, systemic health inequities, and social determinants of health. As of July 20, 2020, 46.5% of the coronaviruses in Philly are occurring in the Black community. There is an urgent need to rectify any and all operational and marketing issues. I've heard great ones today, thank you, at all levels, to ensure that all persons who desire to vote by mail-in ballots are able to do it without concern for their health and well-being. Before I submit the following recommendations: collaborate with community advocates, leaders, ministers to ensure that all citizens are educated and have a working knowledge of how to request, receive, and submit a mail-in ballot. Conduct a marketing campaign to increase awareness, inclusive of door-to-door. Train community partners, advocates, and others to do this outreach and assist family members, neighbors, church members to enroll to vote by mail. Having the mail-in option is critically needed now as we move towards the November election during the COVID-19 pandemic that in and of itself is a crisis within the Black community. Thank you all so very much. I also would like to give thanks for the recommendations for the early voting centers, as well as the urgent need for the funds to support our voting and our ability to vote. This is critical. Please take that under consideration. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Dunstan. Okay. I don't see names, so I'm going to go with the gentleman and then the lady. State your name for the record.
Yes, hello, my name is John Zimmerman. I'm a committee person down in South Philly, Ward 26, Division 12. I just wanted to also just kind of discuss the letter from Protect Our Vote Philly. I was also one of the people that co-signed that letter. It outlines a number of issues that they were concerned about, that we're concerned about. Obviously, time is tight, and I think we all are very aware of some of the issues. But I just wanted to just emphasize the desire that, I would love it if the council would definitely take a look at that letter and try to implement as many of those policies as possible. But the one thing I just wanted to leave you guys with was more of a personal thought here. Like, I lived in South Florida during the whole 2000 election hanging Chad nonsense, and it is a blemish that Florida will never live down. And I just want to say on a personal note, like, it is not something that I'd like to see Philadelphia be a club. I don't want them in that club. And I just really want to leave you guys with that note that we really need to do something about this, or we're going to be in trouble. I know everybody takes it seriously, and I know everybody knows that, but just taking someone who watched some of that stuff go down firsthand, I was like a county away. It is not something we want to experience or be a part of in any way, and I just really want to encourage you guys to really just take this very seriously and just do what needs to be done. And to the lady that said that the committee people want to be involved, I'm a committee person. I totally understand. And I agree with her. It's difficult because we try to get all the work and do the work and get the word out. And it's tough sometimes, and we could use all the support we can get. So I know time is tight, and I don't want to take up too much time, but I just want to thank you all for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. And it's interesting. I was sitting here thinking about that very close election with the first Bush. George, was it Junior? It was Junior, right? And
Bush, yeah.
Yeah, and how close that was, and how that could have, a recount right then could have split the country right in half. So fair processes are very important, no matter who wins.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
And thank you for your patience, ma'am. Please state your name and begin your testimony.
Hello, everyone. My name is Emma Tramble, and I am a Philadelphia voter, and I have a different perspective than the many members of the general public. Professionally, I'm a community and voter engagement. Professionally, I'm a community and voter engagement strategist who works locally and nationally, including Georgia, Wisconsin, and Michigan. So I'm very familiar with quick changing laws and all kind of things that may happen as voters go to the polls. But the reason I'm here is because of my labor of love. In Philly, I run a grassroots organization called My Family Votes that focuses on strengthening and empowering Black voters through shared information. So one of the things that happened in April, I started phoning the commissioner's office to get clarification clarification around mail-in voting. And I called so much, basically they know my voice and my name and probably my number. And there are 3 areas that became crystal clear about operationally that we could see improvement in. I'm really grateful to the Commissioner's Office as well as people who specifically work in Room 142 and Delaware Avenue, because they actually helped provide us with rules and regulations around mail-in voting, which made our work very accurate. So one thing that is the way the commissioners' offices are set up creates information silos. So even when you go to the official website, PhiladelphiaVotes.com, and you go to the Contact Us page, there are 5 phone numbers on that page. And voters have expressed that they don't know what commissioners do, so they don't know which commissioner's office to call, and they don't know which number to use. So I'm suggesting that perhaps there be one number that routes voters, possibly, and spreads out the calls among the commissioner's office, just to remove some of that confusion. Also, information needs to be shared and standardized between the different commissioners' offices so that when you call, you get the same information regardless of where you call, particularly a deeper knowledge of laws, rules, and procedures so that the next steps for voters are clear. The next area is more nimble and better online landing places for information. Commissioner Spear did mention that they are looking at an online app and some other advertisements, but PhiladelphiaVotes.com is like the official landing place, and most voters do not know about that website. It contained information where you could put your address in and find out where that new polling place was. That was not included on the postcard. So any information that the commissioner's offices send out to voters, it would be great if they included that website address. Also, for fast-moving information, websites are very hard to update quickly, and there was a lot of missing information, or it was very slow to post around drop boxes or the deadline changes around mail-in voting. And if there was one official social media site that people could access, all of the commissioners have their own sites, but they're not official. And of course, again, if you don't know who the commissioners are or what they do, you may not visit them. And the last piece is those people who have big platforms can do a lot of great work. There are many, and I mean many, telephone town halls given by officials of whether they were elected or they have a specific office. The information was not always accurate or confusing. Commissioner Dealey did say that information changes rapidly. We were able to stay on top of the rapid information because we do leverage social media, and it would be great if maybe the commissioner's office offered like a cheat sheet for elected officials when they do give like telephone town halls, so they have the basic information, and then they can provide phone numbers or the phone number for people to call so that they can, follow up. It was very heartbreaking to hear seniors on those telephone town halls weeks before the election lamenting about how they may not be able to vote. There are safety nets and checks built into the system, but because of the information flow, it wasn't sufficient for people to know what to do. So I do believe that we can do better. Philly is a great town. We've got a lot of smart people, and I appreciate this meeting, and I look forward to whatever I can do to help us move forward. Thank you.
Thank you for, we're glad to hear from My Family Votes. Is that the name of it? Okay. All right.
Yes. .com.
All right. Ms. Williams.
Sergio Cia, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Please state your name for the record and begin your testimony.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Sergio Cia. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a Democratic committee person in the 46th ward. In my view, the primary election was a confusing mess and contributed to the disenfranchisement of our voters. There was a deep disinvestment when we look at communities of color, Black voters make up nearly 50% of our active voter base, but when it came to mail-in ballot applications, we're severely underrepresented. Latinos in North Philly divisions had the lowest use of mail-in ballots. That means that these folks either sat out the election or voted in person. And let us be clear that anyone who voted, worked, or volunteered in person at the polls did so at great risk for their lives and health. The consolidation of polls and lack of information surrounding poll closing, as mentioned before, cost us close to 20,000 votes, according to the 66 Wards blog, which also noted that Black voter divisions had strongest fall off when divisions were moved far away. So, like many people invested in elections, I had many questions about the primary, given that we were going through changes from Act 77, a pandemic, civil rights uprising that is ongoing. We can all agree that these are great challenges. Getting information from the city commissioners' offices was difficult, and we would get last-minute notice about drop-off locations, both for ballot applications and actual ballots, many of which were one-time locations only for 2 hours. Some in offices, candidates were running for primary. Our ward was promised by city commissioners that all original polling places would get a sign informing voters that their location had changed at the location. That never happened. A simple solution there could be notifying committee people of both parties in advance so that we can address it ourselves, because we're more than willing to do that if we're informed. If we're told that to expect something, we will expect it. I'm worried about litigation targeting ballot drop-off locations and invalidating votes with ballots missing secrecy envelopes. That's a mistake that many voters I know made, including my partner. And on election day, I was volunteering from opening to closing alongside Judith, who spoke earlier, at Christie Register in West Philly. That was where a combination of a dozen polls had been consolidated, and there was not enough hand sanitizer or PPE provided. And voters, board workers, and volunteers largely relied on candidates that were running for office for these public needs. We had droves of people all day come to our location, assuming it was the ballot drop-off location, as Judith mentioned. Folks that went to Latin Boys went to us and then had to go to Blackwell Library. Many of them came like right before the end of time. So they wouldn't have had enough time to go from Christie Rec Center to Blackwell in time to make the deadline. So that was the active disenfranchisement that we were seeing. We had so many of the voters who applied for mail-in and never received it and were confused what to do next. Many of those voters didn't vote because of health concerns. I know that was the case for Karen Bojar, who is a committee person who literally wrote the book on committee people. I think that this might be the first election that she wasn't able to go because she didn't receive one. At the polls on election day, there was no social distancing. We had a long line of tables in a row with election board workers sitting right next to each other, many not using PPE properly or at all. Voters similarly were right next to each other, though some had social distancing in front and in back of them. But since they were all in lines next to each other, that wasn't really social distancing. And similar to what other folks said, some folks, depending on their last name, were in and out, and others were in really long lines depending on their last name. And that was kind of unsafe at Christie Rec, and because it was a nice day, we could have had more social distancing outside in an open air area for people to wait before they go inside. But I know that November, we might be dealing with rain or other situations, so we need to be preparing for that as well. The majority of voters at Christie Rec were members of the Black community who faced disproportionate rates of infection and death from COVID-19 when compared to white peers. So we need to be doing better. Committee people at other polls reported long lines, election board workers who were told not to come in, but the replacements were no-shows. It's clear that more training is needed for our workers, and we should be feeding, paying, and supporting them for their service and sacrifice. We also need to actively manage expectations for election results, which has been frustrating for many. Just letting folks know, it might take a while, but on election day, I was hearing people really close to the Democratic Party saying, just check results tomorrow, which was definitely not the case. In this political moment, Philadelphia should be clear that if Black lives matter, then Black voters should matter as well. We need investment in Black and Brown divisions to make sure that they are informed and registered for voting by mail. Barriers such as internet access and limited turnaround need to be addressed. Mail-in applications should be sent to every voter like they have been done in other counties, and postage payments should be covered. Because of distrust with voting by mail, much of it coming directly from the president, we need messaging campaigns and inform voters that vote by mail is the most healthy and reliable way to vote. But also, as Councilmember Thomas said earlier, making space for folks who do see voting in person as like a tradition, and maybe making space for early voting. Regardless of party or preferred candidate, I think we are all committed to having a just election that addresses our voters' needs in regards to health, access, reliability, and transparency. I thank you for your time, and thanks to all those who submitted testimony and solutions today.
I want to thank you for taking a deeper dive. One of the things that we didn't cover as well as we probably should was the whole pandemic and social distancing aspect of an election. So thank you for kind of underlining that particular aspect of it.
Yeah, and I definitely want to say we really need to be using a lens of race, because that's who's going to be disproportionately affected, especially in the general election.
Well, thank you again. Ms. Williams.
Our last witness today is Carol Rosenthal. Ms. Rosenthal, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Good afternoon, Ms. Rosenthal. Please begin your testimony.
Thank you. My name is Carol Rosenthal. I live in Fairmount, and I organize Fairmount Votes. I'm also a committee person here in the 15th Ward. We really used the primary in the 15th Ward as a dress rehearsal for the general, and we had a lot of success with getting folks to vote by mail. I think we had the second highest percentage of voters apply to vote by mail in the city. And there's a lot that we learned that we'd like to repeat, and a lot of things that we know that we need to do and change. And I just wanted to share with you some of our observations and things that I think could be done both by city council folks and state reps, since I have the attention of both of these categories of people. One of them is training all of your constituent services staff to provide support to voters over the phone. Maybe some of you have already done this, and I also do not know what the workload currently is of your constituent services staff, so I apologize if this is not realistic, but I think it would be very useful to explore. In the primary, hold times at the Department of State often exceeded 30 minutes. People were calling to learn about vote by mail. These are the same that we're trying to call about unemployment. So many people right now are on hold just in their daily life. And 30 minutes is not, it's not, there's no excuse for that. Also, the Board of Elections was often just simply too swamped to take any calls at all. And that's so understandable when we hear about their great staffing needs that they have. So I think it's really important that a place that constituents know to call, state reps, city council, that instead of referring their questions out to a different phone number to call, if you can instead provide the answers to the questions that they have. If they need a paper application, that you have them on hand along with stamped return envelopes. The city commissioner's office was phenomenal about providing plenty of these to us. We ran our own voter hotline here in Fairmount. I would get many, many calls a day because we publicized the hotline. And so when voters knew to call us and say, hey, I need a replacement ballot, I would get a list of everybody who called me throughout the day, and I would make one call to Trish or Donna and Lisa Dealey's office, who were phenomenal, and I saved so many people the time waiting on hold or just not knowing the information. And so if there's the capacity to build out the constituent services staff in your offices to help alleviate some of this pressure on the Board of Elections, I think that would be really useful for voters who sometimes feel left in the dark and frustrated. Also, every person who's on city council knows how to run a campaign because you got elected. You ran a good one. Same with state reps. You're in office. And so using your know-how about running campaigns to reach out to your constituents about vote by mail, how to apply, and also when to return the ballots. I think it's important that we start to have consistent, simple messaging that is used throughout throughout the city, and people look to you as leaders and leadership. And we know, particularly in communities of color, it's important to have validators talking about vote by mail. It's important to see pictures of these validators filling out applications, putting them in the mailbox. And I think it's you all have a great power and a great role to play. And then it's important going forward, too, that there's so many things that we don't know because Harrisburg won't be in session until September and because there are lawsuits that we don't have a verdict on yet. But what we do know, as Commissioner Deely said, is we have time, and we have to start now. And we believe that one of the best things we can do is set a false deadline of applying to vote by mail for September 14th. That doesn't necessarily mean that you tell voters that that's when they have to do it, but your internal organizing around this needs to begin now so that voters apply by September 14th, and then that you begin to send out the message that ballots have to be returned immediately. As soon as they're sent in the mail, start telling people, you get your ballot, return it immediately. I think these are things that we can do to help take pressure off of the Board of Elections. Another thing is the coordination of all of this great work that so many nonprofits are doing, legislators, council people. When I heard Commissioner Deely say, well, there are already 3 entities that are going to be sending out ballots to voters, I just think, why? Can we have one person who's helping with coordination? We need to make sure that entities and organizations aren't duplicating efforts. It's very confusing to voters. I had many voters call me and say, I just got a paper application in the mail from my council person. I think I have to apply again. My application must not have gone through. Because people are getting applications from multiple sources, it does become confusing. And so I think there's a great role for coordination and a coordinator, and there's funding to do this. And 2 more things that I want to comment on are another thing that I know that there is funding for, and I am aware of a lot of nonpartisan funding sources that I am happy to share that can help do this work. And one thing that I think would be very useful is some people alluded to the long lines that happen at polling locations. And so many of people being sent away because maybe they don't have the right ID to vote for the first time. Maybe they're in the wrong polling location. They don't know their division. They weren't sure what to do because they've already applied for a mail-in ballot, but they're in line anyway. I think it's really important that we recruit customer service workers who are volunteers that can work the lines, particularly in communities of color where there is a higher rate of disenfranchisement and voter suppression, that we have folks who can be in the lines and help people make sure that they're in the right polling place before they wait for 2 hours, that they have the right ID before they wait for 2 hours, that we're handing out to people diagrams of how the machines work. Many people who only vote in every presidential election, but not the elections in between, will never have used these machines. And they're confusing when you look at it for the first time, so that we're training people in line. When you go inside, this is what you're going to need to do. There is funding to do this work, and we just need the leadership to coordinate it. I believe the same is true with committee people. I felt extremely underutilized as a committee person, and I took it upon myself to do work. The last person was speaking about polling locations not having any signage about where it changed and how the commissioners said that they were going to hang those signs up. They did, and there happened to be many barriers that prevented them from being able to do that. So as committee people, we made our own signs to tell people where polling locations had changed to. We made our own signs saying, here are the places that you can drop off a ballot. Don't walk to the next polling location and think you can take it there. You can't. Here's where you can go instead. We hope that systems are in place so that we don't need to have this sort of in-the-moment triage. However, as we've seen in the last election, challenges do arise, and I think we need to make sure that we're using committee people on the ground to, again, help take the pressure off of the Board of Elections. We have heard how much work it is going to be to simply run an in-person election and do all of the mail-in counting of mail-in ballots. And we really need to get resourceful about how volunteers and committee people can best use their time. So I also wanted to end by including my phone number and saying, please feel free if you are an elected and you are interested in learning more about nonpartisan funding sources. I do a lot of fundraising. I'm connected to a lot of national funders. They're very interested in supporting voting infrastructure throughout the country. And there are a lot of eyes on Philadelphia right now, and I think they could use some direction in how this money could be spent and who the best leaders in the community are to put the message about vote by mail forth. So my phone number is 215-765-1420. Again, 215-765-1420. My name is Carol Rosenthal, and I really welcome any calls about connecting funding to ways that you can provide these services to constituents in your council districts.
Putting your phone number out there like that is a true commitment. Thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
All right. All right. Are there any questions from members of the committee or members of the Pennsylvania State House? Any closing comments, Representative Boyle?
I just want to thank you, Councilman Jones, and I think we got a lot of useful information from this hearing, and we need to get to work to make sure that this election, this pivotal election, which I said earlier is the most important election since 1860, runs smoothly in the city of Philadelphia and also the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So thank you, Councilman, for everything you did to put this together.
Thank you. Samantha Williams, are there any other people to testify?
We do not have any more witnesses to testify, but we do have some individuals who submitted written testimony to be incorporated into the record, and that is from Vanessa Fields, Margaret Shaw, Lena Smith, and Karen Bohar.
Thank you for that, and we will include that in the official testimony. Hearing no others to testify, this concludes the business before the Committee on Legislative Oversight today, and this hearing.
Jones?
Yes.
I believe Councilmember Green wanted to be recognized.
Councilmember Green, please.
Thank you, sir.
Member Green?
Just multitasking here this afternoon, but thank you for a great hearing. I just hope that we'll be able to reconvene again, especially considering this was joint with our colleagues in Harrisburg and here in Philadelphia. This is such an important issue. This type of joint collaboration is very important. And I know before we know it, it'll be Labor Day and then October, and then we'll have the election. So hopefully this committee could maybe come together or continue to have conversations, even if it's not necessarily in a traditional public hearing, but still find ways to work collaboratively as we move into November.
We want to again thank Representative Boyle for initiating this and making sure that city and state issues came together, because if you don't do joint hearings like this, by the time this group agrees with that group, the election will be over. And so everyone heard what they needed to hear from all of the panelists, and hopefully we can take this information, make it useful, and apply the appropriate resource to make it a smooth election. And I hope we can do that. Are there any other members who wish to speak?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, this is Mark Squilla. I do want to thank you too. I especially want to thank Samantha for her great job in delegating all the information out to the folks. And It's not an easy job. Everybody has a lot of questions, and your team did a great job. So thank you, and Representative Boyle and everybody else who was involved in this. It's a lot more work to do, but I think we're up to it, and looking forward to positive impact from it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and is that it, Ms. Williams?
Yes, that's it. And thank you, Councilman Spiller.
So I feel the same way, but I'll tell you another time. Not doing it publicly. No, thank you very much, Ms. Williams, for your hard work and diligence. This concludes the business before us today, the Committee on Legislative Oversight. We will stand at recess to the call of the chair, just in case we have to come back at this. Thank you all very much.
Thank you all. Stay safe.
Thank you all. Take care. Great hearing.
Thank you.